All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
You're listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is James Payne.
I'm Dalton Gray.
I'm Mariah Humphreys.
And today is going to be a little bit more of a laid-back episode. This episode was kind of inspired by Zach down in Iowa with the Deeply Driven Outdoors podcast. He's written into the show several times, and we talked a little bit. Been listening to his show. Definitely go give him a listen if you would like. But he has an episode from a few weeks back about his struggles in turkey hunting and how he learned from his mistakes and talked about some of the mistakes he's made and things like that. And I kind of got to figuring that there's probably a lot of first-time moose hunters out in the woods right now. Everybody's out trying to get one, and there might be a lot of strategies that some of us might have started with or thought, some things that might seem like good ideas but really aren't. So I figured today we could tell some stories of our own early days of moose hunting, things we tried, lessons we learned, and all that good stuff. We've also got a little surprise for you guys at the end of this episode, so keep an ear out for that. But before we get too far, definitely if you have any moose hunting or any hunting questions pertaining to Alaska, definitely go ahead and contact us on our social medias. We've got, if you search at The Northern Hunter on either Facebook or Instagram, you'll find us. Got an email, info@thenorthernhunter you can reach out to, or if you go to the website, we've got a nice shiny contact button that Mo built for us.
It's not shiny.
It can be, depending on your resolution. We also have a partners page there and a shop page that we have some nice merch, hats, t-shirts, hoodies, things like that. It really helps us out if you support the show and get you some of that. If you'd like to support us while you're on your adventure.
While you're on your hunt, you need to be protecting your rifle with a rifle cover from Stealthy Hunter, our good friend Ryan Lampers. We'd appreciate it if you'd shop from any of our sponsors or partners that we have. We have discount codes through Stealthy Hunter, Hammer Bullets, Yukon River Knives, 60-inch Club, that I mentioned, Weatherby, and Batum 907. Now, for the discount codes, we have a discount code for Batum 907 that is TNHP. That's all of our bear attractants and lures, also trapping and moose lures, legal for the use in Alaska. For Yukon River Knives and Hammer Bullets and 60-inch Club and Stealthy Hunter, your discount code is the Northern Hunter. There's no discount code for Weatherby currently. If you buy a rifle from them and we helped influence that decision, just let them know that we sent you. One more thing I want to add on to here. If you go into our partners page and you're looking at these partners that I just named off, you'll see a page that says Our Partners. Underneath, you'll see the 6 logos of these existing partners that I just mentioned. And then there's a big red Read More button. If you click that button, those are listed out with a short paragraph description about each sponsor. And under each applicable sponsor, it shows the discount code. So if you forget or you don't remember versus TNHP or The Northern Hunter, which one was which, you can always go refresh your memory on the partners page and then click Read More. And then you'll have a website link and the discount code applicable for each sponsor.
Absolutely. And they're also listed in the show notes on whatever platform you're listening to. We have links to the sponsors and the discount codes there as well.
Excellent.
So if that's a little bit easier for you guys, just scroll down in the show notes and find those. Great place to go.
Yes.
So interesting story to kick this one off that I read. So
I love stories.
Yeah, so I've been watching a little bit of the news, kind of scrolling through that KTOO website again. It's one of our old throwback favorites. And they have a story here, and the title is Southeast Alaska Wolves Are Not Threatened or Endangered. Federal agency concludes.
Really?
So, yeah.
I say that with sarcasm.
To any of us that live in the area or live in Alaska and know people in that area, that's pretty obvious. But so just read the first little bit. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has again rejected a request to list Southeast Alaska's wolves as endangered or threatened. The wolves found in Southeast Alaska and British Columbia range among the region's large old trees and are a subspecies of gray wolves. Goes into a little bit of detail about what it would entail if they were to be put on the endangered species list. And I just can't tell you how happy I am that the Fish and Game Service looks at these things legitimately for what the actual population size is, the population retention, the recruitment rate, what the hunting and trapping.
And so Fish and
take
Game made
is.
this decision to say no.
Well, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
in part with Alaska's Fish and Game Department as
Right.
well. They did a lot of
I'm sure
research.
they had
and-
some input.
Yeah, and took a lot of the data and everything like that. But this is apparently the third time since 1993 that people have tried to put those wolves on the endangered species
Really?
list, which kind of, as I just said a couple minutes ago, if you know anybody in that region or you pay attention to that region
And this
at
is
all,
just southeast.
just southeast.
Is it specific
Yeah.
to like one localized area, or is it the
No.
entire southeast wolf
entire
population?
southeast wolf population?
Really?
So all those ones that are eating all the deer.
the ones that
and
we
run-
said were eating sea
and
otters.
eating well, yeah,
Yeah.
and then running rampant, and apparently they're endangered or need to be on the endangered species list.
Yeah.
So
I like what you
I'm
have
sure
they
on our little breakdown about the podcast here. It says wolves saved from going on endangered species list.
yeah, absolutely they were.
Right.
That would be just a horrible thing for the people down there. I mean, they just last year in part of Southeast Alaska, they implemented an extra trapping season just to try and control the wolf population because
Yeah.
it's getting so bad in certain areas of Southeast.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Prince of
And-
Wales is having a particularly hard time.
Right. Yeah. And so they're actively trying to get people to take out more of them because there's
Yeah.
too many
Right,
to
right.
be sustainable for other ungulate populations and things like that. And so it's just another one of those things, kind of like we were talking about with the caribou herds. You get these groups, these environmental groups that come up and they try to instill these new rules and try to change things when largely they have not a lot of data to support what they're trying to do. And I just wanted to say it's very nice to see that
Yeah.
the Fish and Wildlife Service is legitimately looking into things. They're not just caving because it's popular.
They had our backs on this one.
Yeah, they had our backs. They're looking at all the data and making an educated decision that no, they don't need to be on that list. Because what that would imply is basically a lot of the industry that's down there would be affected by that because now you have protected habitat for an
Mhm.
endangered species.
Right.
It would completely close down all of the hunting and trapping, which
Mhm.
would be very counterproductive to the
Oh, yeah.
efforts they're trying to do down there with
Oh, yeah.
with deer rehabilitation and things like that. And so I read that and I just had to bring it up. I'm so happy to see that.
Yeah, that's great.
And it is kind of hard that, whenever one of these pushes comes down from these groups and whatnot, it's a legal process and they are required to entertain it and at least look into the details.
Mhm. Right.
Whether that's the lawsuits for the, what is that? The
Intensive management.
intensive management process that they were doing, or
and that was for the
the
Mulchatna caribou.
Mulchatna caribou herd. And they've done it for other species all over the
Yeah.
place. They just did
Yeah.
that several years ago for the muskox herds.
Mhm.
And essentially, for folks that missed that was
Mhm.
Fish and Game going out for just over 2 weeks in helicopters,
Yeah.
protecting the calving caribou that were
Right.
giving birth, protecting them from predators for just about 17 days, I think it was.
It was.
And in that span, they killed just under 100 brown bears,
Right.
couple of black bears and a couple of wolves, and now there's an active
Mhm.
lawsuit about it.
There's
So-
2 active lawsuits.
Oh,
about
really?
It.
There's
Yeah.
a second one.
And they weren't just, massacring the bears in this region.
It was just the bears
They
that
literally
were coming
shepherded
after.
that herd.
Right.
and they only take the bears that are coming in to kill
Right.
calves specifically.
Exactly.
Because that's a trained behavior that bears get used to
Right.
year after year. Oh, these calves are easy
Yeah.
food. You take those bears out of the equation.
Right.
Now you get a lot higher
Right.
calving
Right.
survival rate.
Right.
They did the same thing with muskox because that was the exact
Yeah.
issue they had.
Yeah.
Once they've looked at the food, how's the nourishment, things like that. The adults are surviving. Then they
Yeah.
look at predation, calf survival rates, and things like that.
Now-
and they make an educated decision
Yeah.
on how to actively.
Question.
Yeah.
Who are these two entities that are bringing the lawsuit against Alaska to Fish?
It hasn't said
Department of Fishing.
in all of the articles that I've read. It hasn't actually said who. It just said that there are 2 active lawsuits. So we might be able to do some more digging and look into that.
I was going to say,
Um,
I think we should try to look into that.
But this is a perfect example. We've talked about it on the show before of, people that understand hunting, understand real conservation,
Yeah.
understand the role hunting plays in that, and not abusing this endangered species list
Right.
and the protective acts that go into that.
Yeah.
The struggles people are going through in the lower 48 trying to get grizzly bears off of that list,
Right.
in a lot of different ranges. And it's just such a nightmare to see,
Mhm.
all of these things get pushed. But it's great to see that people are making educated decisions based
Yeah.
on real data. So I just wanted to say that I'm so happy to read this.
Yeah.
So
Now, before we get into the next thing, you just reminded me of an article that I just read today.
oh really?
And I'm not going to even look it up right now because there were very few details about it. I have more homework to do on it. But the basic summary of it is we mentioned a grizzly bear attack in the lower 48. I believe it was Wyoming,
Okay.
where a grizzly bear killed a woman earlier this
yeah.
summer on a hiking trailhead.
Right. Yeah. I remember that.
This last week, 2 archery elk hunters were hunting, I believe, in Wyoming. This was, regardless of where it was the same state in the same area where that attack had happened.
Mm.
They were charged and surprised by a grizzly bear. They shot it with sidearms and killed it. And Fish Wildlife down there, the biologists believe that this is the same bear that attacked and killed the woman earlier
Really?
this year.
Wow.
So it was like a learned
So
behavior.
the same menace grizzly bear
Yeah.
made attempts at 2 attacks and was successful on 1. Carry a sidearm if you're bow hunting, fellas.
Yeah.
Right
Mhm.
now,
Absolutely.
it's right in the heat of archery elk
Right.
season in the low 48. Nobody's got rifles out in the field yet.
Mm-hmm.
For most of these seasons for elk anyway.
Yeah.
Make sure you're packing heat.
Yeah.
Okay.
A sidearm's not perfect for a bear. Obviously a rifle is better.
I'd rather have
but
a 9mm
it's
than a
lot
handful
better
of
than
rocks.
nothing.
Yeah.
a lot better than nothing.
I'd rather have a small
Mhm.
semi-automatic self-defense pistol that I would normally use for 2-legged defense
right.
to use on a bear than a bow.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
better to have something that goes bang.
Yeah. I will say, I'm going to do this next one really quick while I'm on the topic of
Yeah.
articles I'm happy about seeing.
Yes.
And then you can go into yours.
Okay.
It's a little bit
Back to the
of a
doom and
different vibe shift. Yeah. So another one, I just wanted to touch on this really quickly and just say how happy I am to read this. But there's a whole school district in Alaska.
Yes.
And it's up off the Kuskokwim River. There's 3 Yupik villages that have altered their school schedule
Mm.
around subsistence harvest periods for hunting and fishing. So they start school a little bit later. I think it said like 10 days or something like that. They end school a little bit sooner, and they worked it out with the education board that they're going to make up those hours with an extra like half hour a day or something like that
Nice.
during what is now the new school year.
Hmm.
And that way the kids can be involved in the process, involved in the harvest, involved in the cleaning and the packaging of meat and everything, and preservation, and really learn that lifestyle.
Smoking. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. I think it's great to get kids involved in hunting and fishing and kind of learning these subsistence traits and
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
do all of this. And I just wanted to really quickly say that's also a KTOO article, and I was just super happy to read that one. Lots of support from this side of the table, at least. So
Well, I guess we could say we're going to take a deep dive in a different direction on this next one. No pun intended. If you go over to, again, KTOO's website on August 28th of 2023, there was an article that came out of Haines. The title says, "Details emerge about Haines canoe accident that left guiding clients critically hypothermic." Now it says guiding clients. I would assume it's meant to say guide and clients, but we'll just graze over that and overlook that. The article goes on to say 2 weeks ago, a canoe from a Haynes guiding company took on water at Chilkoot Lake. Its 7 passengers and 2 guides spent a substantial amount of time in the lake's cold water as they swam to shore before being rescued. We spoke with Haynes Fire Chief Brian Clay about the incident and the department's response. The accident happened on a windy Sunday afternoon at the far end of Chilkoot Lake. The group was on a canoe with the Haynes guiding company, Alaska Mountain Guides. It was blowing probably 15 gusts to 25 up there, said Haynes Fire Chief Brian Clay, who was at the lake fishing with his granddaughter at the time. My understanding is they started taking on water, and as it swamped, they couldn't bail fast enough, and it just swamped itself. So for anybody that doesn't know, there was some chop on the water.
Yeah.
A lot of people in a canoe, a lot of weight. Chilkoot Lake is a big lake. You can look it up and get an idea of how big this is. And
very big lake.
For folks that haven't been been out on big lakes like that, where you can actually accumulate waves and whitecaps out there, it can get very dangerous very quickly. Reading on here, it says, as the canoe took on water, 7 elderly passengers and 2 guides found themselves swimming for shore. All reportedly were wearing flotation devices, but they spent about half an hour in the glacier-fed lake before reaching shore. Another boat from the guiding company reportedly picked them up from the beach and brought them to the parking lot where Chief Clay met them. They go on to say they all had hypothermia and 3 were critical, he said. 3 were walking or green, as we say in our business. So I would assume green means good to go. The 3 critical patients were sent by private vehicles to meet with the ambulances on their way from town. The other 4 were escorted to the clinic in fire and police department vehicles. At least 5 of the patients were later medevaced, according to Clay, and ambulance volunteers were busy late into the night shuttling those patients between clinic and the airport. Clay says once activated, the emergency response went smoothly, but the first call to 911 was directed to the wrong dispatcher. I believe the initial 911 call went to the Fairbanks regional office for the sat phones, and they didn't know where Chilkoot Lake was, Clay said.
Kind of makes sense if it's the wrong part of the state.
Kind of does. But.
The news source could not check directly on the health of the patients. Alaska Mountain Guide owner Sean Gaffney did not respond to multiple requests for comments.
Yeah.
Folks, we've talked a lot about safety on the water on this show and how exposure to the elements is the number one killer in Alaska every single year, whether you're in the hunting realm or not. And this is a prime example of that. Exposure, whether it be in the water or just soaking wet from rain and snow and cold exposure conditions, hypothermia is no joke.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, well, probably a month or more ago now, we mentioned that story of my dad and his fishing party down at the Copper River while dip netting outside of Chitna, and the couple of individuals that had a boating incident and they went in the water. Both of them survived by a miracle of God, no doubt.
Yeah.
And these 7 passengers and 2 guides, I believe it said, 9 people went in Chilkoot Lake
for 30 minutes.
For a half hour.
Wow.
That's a long time in glacier-fed water.
The fact that not one of them drowned is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So people like to talk about, well, I'm a good swimmer. I'm comfortable in water. Folks, it's fall in Alaska.
Yeah.
This is a glacier-fed lake. That is nothing to mess with.
Yeah.
That water is barely above ice temperature.
Right.
It's in the 30 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay. There isn't a swimmer on God's green earth that can go from warm, in warm clothes, in a boat, and your body temperature is already somewhat dropped below normal because of the elements. And you can go from that and being somewhat dry to then dropped into just above freezing temperature water, and you don't shock and start to freeze immediately.
And water especially, that's a lot different than going from, say, a warm building into even that, what is that place that has the -40 room here in Fairbanks? Where you can walk in and it's -40. Air does not suck the heat out of you as quickly as water does.
I just saw something about how water draws heat out of the body a certain multiple factor.
Yeah, like almost 20 times from what I was told.
I thought it was
it's
6
insane.
or 9 times faster than air
that.
does. It
I think I saw the same
more.
thing you did, but yeah, it's more than that. I don't know the exact numbers, so don't quote me on it. But yeah, it's insane.
But regardless, it sucks the heat right out of you immediately.
Yeah.
And the fact that all of them were able to make it to shore over the course of a half hour is really impressive. And, good for the guides. I'm sure that they had a lot to do with that.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you got to know your stuff if you're going to be out there with 7 elderly clientele.
Yeah.
On a lake like that.
And number one is, even if you feel confident, even if you feel comfortable, always wear your life vest.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of stories from survivors of instances like this where they'll talk about how quickly the shock takes over, and you can't control your limbs, you can't control your muscles. A lot of them talk about blacking out at multiple various points in getting out of the water, whether they were pulled out or they floated to the shore.
Yeah.
Without a life vest, if you black out, that's donezo.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I just looked it up. It's 25 times faster.
25?
Yeah. Because it's greater density.
Right.
So it can hold, has more heat capacity.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow. So very different than the air temperature changing.
Yeah.
That is a massive difference.
Yeah. So if you had to pull something away from this, I'd say number one, if you're out on a big lake like that or out in the ocean and you are in a non-motorized craft and you feel the conditions changing, get off the water.
Yeah.
Do everything you can. Now, they might have been paddling for shore. I understand things happen.
Oh, yeah. It didn't go into the conditions of where they were or what they were doing.
You can't always be in control of that. But if you can, and if you know a storm is coming, if you feel that weather shift and a front moves in and the wind starts picking up a little bit and you're far away from shore, get to shore.
Yeah.
At least get out of the wind, get behind an island out there. I don't know if there were any islands to get behind, but do your best to get out of that exposed wind tunnel that's about to hit. Because once it starts building, it doesn't take long for water to build fast when the wind picks up like that. Well, 15 to 25 miles an hour is nothing to cough. I'm sorry. Nothing to cough at. That's nothing to laugh off.
Right.
That's a substantial amount of water moving at that point.
Well, and it can change in a heartbeat. You know, and I think you had brought it up when we were talking about you coming back from your deer hunt.
Yeah.
You know, how to watch the weather, how to keep an eye on what's going to happen, different ways that you can do that. And it is super important because when you're out there is nothing between you and what that weather's doing.
Yep.
Nothing.
Yep.
You know, be as prepared as you can, but even then you can't really prepare for everything.
Yep.
So
absolutely. And I just kind of on that note, they called 911 on a sat phone.
Yeah.
And they got sent to Fairbanks office. So you never know, even if you hit even if you get on your sat phone, what if you get directed to the wrong dispatch? Well, now that adds another potential 5 to 10 minutes to the point where somebody even knows where you are, right? So you can't count on that.
Kind of a critical situation can be life or death.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's a game of minutes at that point. So very interesting article. I'm glad everybody's okay. Obviously, that's the best possible outcome of this situation.
Yeah.
But just be careful out there.
Yeah.
Be careful on the water. There's a lot of guys doing float hunts this time of year for moose and caribou and things like that. Fall brown bear season is here in some places, and will start up in October in other parts of the state on Kodiak and the peninsula.
Yeah.
You guys you just have to be careful out there.
Well, and kind of on the topic of float hunts, another aspect to look at with water is current.
Yes.
When you're floating on stuff like that, how it looks on the surface is not how fast that river is or that stream or whatever you're floating on.
Yeah.
You know, you fall in, you capsize your canoe or your raft or whatever you're floating in. That water's moving a lot faster than you think it is, even if it's not pushing your boat that fast.
Yeah.
And it's also very, very cold.
A good visual of how to judge how fast the water is really going off of the surface is wait for a little chunk of foam on the water. You know, those little bubble clumps that just come floating down the river. Wait till one of those comes down. Be on a riverbank, and then when one lines up with you, run as fast as that bubble is moving down the river.
Yeah.
And you'll realize just real quickly how fast the water's actually going. Because even a river that you think, oh, that's not very fast at all, that's pretty slow. Go ahead and run, try to keep up with it.
Yep.
And that'll give you an idea.
Yeah.
And then whatever's doing on the top, it's probably boiling and turning over boulders and logs and things underneath that you can't see.
And especially with rivers, with the glacier-fed rivers,
Yes.
the silt can be a huge factor as well.
Yeah.
Changing the path of the river all the time, make sure you're not getting lost back there. Make sure you can read the river if you're using a motorized craft.
Yeah.
Because those conditions do change all the time.
Yeah.
And if you do end up going in the water in silty conditions, man, that all those little particles just get in the little tiny holes in the fibers of your clothing, and next thing you know, you weigh a lot more than you used to.
Yeah.
Just be very careful. Water's a great way for access, whether it's a lake, a river, whatever you're trying to use. But it can be very dangerous, and it's one of the most dangerous things in Alaska by far.
Yeah, absolutely. Just exercise caution and be safe.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll dive in.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
All right, guys. So we're going to talk about moose hunting, how to get started at it, and what you shouldn't do when you get started at it primarily today. Give some good examples. So just if we talk about something today that you were thinking about doing, hopefully we're able to help. So
this would be like a really good opportunity for us to just insert like some classic Bill Dance blooper music.
Right.
Just play that through the whole section.
Well, and it's everybody starts somewhere.
Well,
everybody starts at a point where they're not doing everything absolutely right. And some people have trouble admitting that.
No.
Some people are like, oh, I was just born the greatest hunter ever. But like
some people are kind of pretentious.
A little bit. Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
And so I think it's a good opportunity to show that, everybody's made these same mistakes if you're about to make them. So I'll go ahead and say the first one that came to my mind when I started thinking about this, which is it's more of a strategy than a direct action. But a lot of people, when they first start off moose hunting, maybe they're not super familiar with areas or anything like that, would be just riding your wheeler. Just finding a trail system, and maybe it's an old industrial road or a trail that goes a long ways, or a area your buddy showed you, and you can wheeler access it, and you just unload the wheeler from the back of the truck and go ride around for the entire evening, hoping to bump into something.
All the way till dark.
I do know people that have killed moose that way. It does happen. You will sometimes bump into something. I mean, you have a better chance when you're in the woods, even riding around on a wheeler, than you do sitting on your couch, right?
Mm-hmm.
But very low odds.
Never happened to me.
Yeah, me either. So
it's because I haven't done it.
But some people will kind of be told wrong information, and one of the things I've heard people be told is that, especially in the middle of the day, you want to run around to try and spook them out of their beds or something like that. And then you just keep riding in the evening, and you just try to push them basically around, and because the noise and everything like that. And maybe they'll move in a way that you can see them, and they'll expose themselves. And what I'm talking about here is specifically very densely forested areas.
Right.
Trails where you can't see 20 yards off either side of the trail.
Yeah.
You might be able to see through the trees a little bit in the immediate area.
Yeah.
If you're riding around in a very wide open area, say you're moose hunting, mountains, in areas where there's not a whole lot of trees, and you do have great visibility, and you're going from place to place looking for moose that are maybe a mile away and then planning how you're going to do your stalk from there. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in a very limited visibility area, it is not the best way to hunt moose.
So it's not
by
even a
trying to
good
run
way.
around.
Yeah.
And, make them move in a way that makes them expose themselves. It does happen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. So if somebody told you that they were successful moose hunting that way, they're not lying. It does happen.
Mhm.
However, in most cases, they're going to move, but in a way that you can't see them.
Yeah.
They're going to go away from you. We've
Right.
talked before on the show about how important sound is and important noise is. Well, anybody's ever been around a four-wheeler, it's not a quiet means of movement.
Yeah.
It's very loud, and depending on the density of the area you're in will change how far that sound will travel. Sometimes it'll go all the way down through a valley, and,
yeah.
and everything down there will hear you coming.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I've tested this in certain areas that I've ridden into, you could only be 200 yards away from your wheeler. I tested that trying to figure out how close I could ride to a bear bait one time. And I had a buddy that was revving on the wheeler, and I just walked out into the woods and saw until how far I had to be before I couldn't hear my wheeler and to know if the bears could hear me coming in.
Yeah.
And so depending on the density, you are able to use a wheeler to access certain areas, but it's much better practice to simply use it to get to where you want to go, the general area, if it's fairly far away. If you're trying to go miles away or anywhere farther than you'd want to walk. But stop short of where you plan on hunting. Don't ride your wheeler all the way into that clearing, because by the time you get there and you're able to see into the clearing, that moose is already gone. It heard you coming before you ever came out of the tree line.
Yeah.
So if that was your plan this year, don't do that. We'll talk about better methods in the future. One quick thing I just got reminded of.
Okay.
While I was talking about that and hunt methods and sound specifically and things like that. When we were talking about this a couple episodes back, there was a listener that wrote in asking about campfires. We gave our opinion on it, right? That we don't have a problem with campfires when we're moose hunting. And then when we were speaking with Jeff Day a couple episodes back, he had mentioned that he doesn't have a campfire because he's camping right in where he's hunting.
Yeah.
And we agreed, depending on the situation, you might want to be a little more careful. I was watching that video with Troy Sessions of the 60-inch Club about calling for moose.
Yeah.
And I loved. Yeah, I'll get into it. So if you haven't watched that video, Troy Sessions is a very good moose hunter. He's the owner of the 60-inch Club we've recently partnered with to help people get out in the woods with him and have higher chances of success. The guy's been a part of tons of big moose kills throughout his years. He's got tons of experience chasing some of the biggest moose. He's got a ton of B and C kills, either personally or through his company that he's taken people out to areas.
Yeah.
And he's got a phenomenal video. I think you mentioned it in the last one about calling moose. And he breaks it down. How do you call in the morning? How do you call at noon? How do you call in the evening? Things like that. Great video. It's like the third one down on his YouTube. If you just search at 60-inch Club on YouTube, you'll find it. A little bit less than 10 minutes long. Phenomenal video. If you're heading out to the woods, highly recommend watching that.
You have to watch that.
But at the end of that video, after he gets done talking about, well, if you don't see anything in the evening hunt, if you're floating or anything like that, you come back, and that's when it's time to get the fire cranking. And he talks about how he's had a campfire at every single camp that he hunts out of, and he's called moose straight into the camp while the fire's roaring. He says he's never had problems with it. So if anybody's looking for another opinion on that, Troy Sessions, the guy that kills tons of big moose and teaches other people how to kill tons of big moose, he's a campfire supporter.
Nice.
He has campfires.
That's the thing about theories like that, right? Because everybody has a theory about something. In this case, we're talking about campfires or no campfires while moose hunting. The guys that I know that refuse to have campfires don't have fires because they don't know if it affects them or not.
Right.
And they're just trying to take one more step that might help them not blow a moose out of there.
And on the flip side of that, you might have a guy that maybe tried for 3 years to get a moose and was unsuccessful the first two, had a campfire the first two. Third year, he's a lot more careful on everything. Didn't have a campfire, got a moose. So Even though he may have changed 10 different things in his hunting style or where he was going or anything like that, he might equate, well, I had a fire these 2 years, didn't get a moose.
Exactly.
No fire this year, got a moose. Clearly,
and he made the wrong connection as to why he was successful that year.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the interesting part about speculations in hunting, to me anyway, is that the people that do things a certain way because, well, I don't know if it makes a difference, but it can't hurt to not do it. So I just will steer clear of it. There's nothing wrong with that. But like we said before, none of us here have ever had a problem with it.
Right.
And Troy Sessions, I had to laugh. He called in one bull that was too small, and it came in and laid down like 40 yards from his campfire and his super cub that was parked on the gravel bar.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many kill shots he has on his YouTube channel, several anyway, of him calling in moose with his airplane sitting right there.
Yeah.
Calls the bull in, crosses a river. This thing is committed to come in and fight. And the hunter shoots it, right? Like it's more about calling and hunt technique than it is about a campfire and even having visual stuff, calling them in with a tent in view or with an airplane or a boat. As long as it's not in their way, for the most part, in remote areas, they're not usually going to care if you've called them in right and if they're turned on to the call.
I like that you just mentioned remote areas because if anybody's listened to the show for a long time, several episodes ago, we talked about the difference how animals behave, whether you're closer to town or farther from town or anything like that. If you're hunting within an hour from a big city, those moose know what people are. They know what the sound of a wheeler is. They know
what a pickup truck looks like.
They know what a pickup truck looks like. Yeah. And so you do got to be a little more careful with those moose.
Right.
But in these remote areas, if you're out in the middle of nowhere,
they don't know what an airplane
half
is.
of them have probably never even seen a person.
I say definitely the visual thing.
Yeah.
Personally, I mean, I've walked up on carefully where they couldn't see me, right? They could hear me, but they couldn't see me. And I just moved slowly like an animal would move, which is you take a step and you stop and you listen and you don't make any noise. And you take another step and you stop and you listen and you don't make any noise, right? And I've walked right up to cow moose that were bedded down. I was sitting, plain as day, sitting on a tall stump in my, was it coyote brown? Is that the Stone Glacier color?
Yeah.
Okay. And my coyote brown de Havilland pants and jacket.
Solids.
Yeah. Against very green grass and bushes. That's what I had for my outer layer.
Blends in pretty good out there in that stuff.
What I was in, no, I stuck out like a sore thumb.
Well, to you.
But you also were in brown, which is a natural color. So
very, very light tan.
And that soft shell jacket is green too. It has a little bit green paneling in it.
It has a little green paneling in it. But like looking at it and comparing it to anything around me, it was brighter than anything but a birch tree. Okay.
Still natural tones
natural tones,
out. Yeah.
But I was completely uncovered. It was pretty warm. And my, from the neck up, I didn't have anything on, no hat, anything.
No face paint.
No face paint. I've never used face paint.
No Rambo style, huh?
And no twigs in my hat or anything like that.
Old Twiggy.
Yeah. But I sat there like that, and I had a cow moose walk up within 10 feet of me and stare right at me. And until I decided to try to reach for my camera, which I knew probably wasn't going to work, she was fine. And even then, she just trotted off and then decided to run off through the trees, right?
Right, yeah.
Because she didn't know what it was. But I've had multiple. One time it was almost dark. It was last light, but it was barely. I could see enough through my scope, just enough. And but it was too dark to make like a 400-yard shot. Okay, so I was trying to close the distance to like 200, and I was also trying to judge this bull for if it was over 50 or not. And I closed it to like 150, walking in open ground with them looking at me.
Yeah,
I would just wait till they went to eating. I would walk because I had to move quickly because it was getting dark. I would walk. As soon when they would stop, look up at me again, I'd stop. I'm 6 foot tall in the middle of nothing but tundra, walking and moving closer to them, but they didn't see me move and they couldn't hear me. Right. So I had to get close enough to make a judgment because it was getting dark. Right.
Yeah.
And I got close enough to make the judgment and it was too small. But like, if you are careful and quiet, that's,
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's the number one thing. It doesn't matter. You could probably wear pink, purple, and bright green.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a quick Google search here. Moose have dichromatic vision and can see colors, but not in a similar way as humans do. They glimpse the world predominantly in blue, dull yellow, and gray shades, and their eyes are sensitive to small and medium wavelength hues due to availability of only 2 kinds of cones. Moose are usually colorblind, but they can see well in low light. They have a large blind spot directly in front of their eyes, which is due to the position of their eyes. I don't know if I buy that one. That's just a simple Google search, and that's on animalsblog.net.
So it says they see in blue?
So another one, can moose see red color? No, moose cannot see red color. It also includes the mule deer and elk. All members of the deer family have more or less the same kind of vision. There are other articles that I didn't even get into. So basically, they can see certain tones better than others, but not all of them well.
Well, yeah, and I've read that before where ungulate species can see blue. Because
Yeah.
I hunt in a flannel fairly often if I'm just
Partly-
running out, and I used to wear a blue flannel.
Yeah,
I have since switched to a red flannel
yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
fact that they can't see red and they can see blue.
Partly from what I'm reading is that it's due to night vision capability.
Mm.
So they can see a lot better in low to no light
Yeah,
than obviously we can.
which makes sense because they're
Right.
needing to survive during those
Right.
hours. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
From nocturnal
So-
predators. So
Yeah. Because they have a lot better night vision, their in the daylight vision is compromised. So that's another reason for, it doesn't have to be camouflage.
yeah,
And, but just earth tones that are the same as the surrounding tones, or at least similar tones, so that you won't pop, right?
right.
So yeah, blues, things like that. So yeah, blue, dull yellow, and gray shades, they can distinguish that.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
if you're in a green field wearing gray, they might pick you out a little bit better, right? Probably not great still. I've heard their vision isn't great to begin with,
Yeah,
but
I've heard that too.
and case in point, I mean, man, I'm not even going to get into that, but even recent encounters with moose, even this season, they step out 100 yards away and just stare at you
Yeah,
for like
it's
5
almost like they're
minutes.
trying to, like-
all right, what is that exactly?
Yeah,
and as
it's-
long as you're still and the wind isn't going right to them, it takes them a minute to figure it out.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway,
But yeah, so move quietly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Don't be blowing through the woods with your wheeler. And I'll just wrap it back to that. So,
yeah.
Mo, you
Yeah.
told a quick story. Do you want that to be your story and then pass it to Dalton? Or do you want to tell another story?
Tell another one, Mariah.
Sure, I can tell another one.
Yeah. I'm going to make you talk a lot in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was planning on talking
put
more
him
than
on-
I usually do.
Try to put him on the spotlight in this one.
I have a lot more experience here than, backcountry sheep or something, right?
Right.
Which I have no experience at this point, but but I'll still insert my opinion, right? I'm on a podcast. Anyhow, but hey, at least I'm not elitist, right?
Are you
There go.
elitist about being an elitist?
Whoa.
Maybe so. About not being elitist, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I'm,
Anyhow,
I'm less elite
So,
than you.
so Wheeler stories related to moose.
Yeah.
Is there a specific direction you want me to go with this,
Just
or
anything you've learned in the past through your experiences that you maybe thought was a good idea at
Like
one point and
techniques
learned
or
wasn't.
strategies. Or,
so? I'll start by commenting.
A story with a point. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start by commenting on what you said
Yeah.
about not just riding around looking for moose.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the area. If you're in a wide open alpine style area,
Right.
I have ridden to within that previous story about walking up to those moose. I've rode to 400 yards in plain sight
Right. And I believe I did clarify that I was talking about
Yeah.
heavily
Yeah.
forested areas.
with them
Yeah.
looking at me. And
You
it's
did.
interesting. If moose are used to wheelers
Mm.
a lot, as long as they don't feel your direct threat, they're used to the noise. Right now, riding in to hunt a field, riding in to hunt a small meadow, or even a large meadow is a lot different than an alpine style open area.
Right.
And you
Right.
mentioned something about that.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting how animals can sense if you're after them or not?
Right.
Like
They can.
how many times have we just driven by moose at 50 miles an hour going
Yeah.
down the highway,
Mm-hmm.
and they're standing on the side of the road and just look at you like, what are you doing on my road, man?
Yeah.
But the instant that you're driving around looking for a moose, potentially on an old logging road, say you're grouse hunting and you see a moose and you slowly come to a stop
That's
and
the
shut the
problem.
truck
You
off.
slowed down and you stopped.
And then you get out of the truck
Mhm.
real stealthy like, and they
Don't even close the door.
And
Yeah,
but as soon as you slow that truck down and roll down the window to look at them through the binos and be like, hey, can I shoot that one?
Mm-hmm.
They're gone. They
Yep.
just take off.
Yep.
Even if you drive down the road and stop a quarter mile away and then walk back, they still leave.
I have a theory,
It's really interesting.
and I don't know how. I have no scientific knowledge of this.
like a sixth sense thing.
I think they know when the seasons are. I think it's
it's
been consistent enough over the years that they just figure out, okay, it's
Like
getting
an
cold.
Instinctual thing.
Yeah, it's getting cold. This is the time of year we start dropping like flies. And, you know,
I don't think they know. I think it's just pressure.
yeah, it could be.
I think it's just pressure.
Like I said, I don't know how they know, but I think they get a sense of, okay, we're in danger now. Whereas like maybe midsummer, it's like 80 degrees outside. They're like, yeah, we've never been shot in 80-degree weather. So yeah, I can't explain it, but it just makes sense. Like you said, it's like they know you're after
Yeah,
them.
it's
weird. Like,
Yeah,
or they'll be all over a residential area all summer long.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden season starts and they're gone.
Right.
Man, I thought I was
like-
going to talk more this episode.
I can't say that I can't say that I definitely have an opinion as to why it is. I just wanted to comment like that is a
Right,
strange part of it.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of wheeler hunting for moose,
Mhm.
a ton of it. A lot of it solo or hunting, maybe out of a base camp with a group and then going riding by myself.
Yeah.
That's basically what I did this past weekend,
Mhm.
right? There was a base camp with the guys there, but I was like, hey, I'm going to head out. I'm going to head a couple miles from you guys and I'm going to go hunt by myself. And I saw just as many moose as they did.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I didn't see any bulls. I think there was a bull that was in the area that I heard a little bit, or at least he could have been. It was just too tight, too small, like ton of moose in there. Hard to see anything. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the way a lot of moose country is, though. A lot of moose
Right.
like that
Is it
tight.
like heavily treed or like tall grass or
So it was an old log cut.
okay, yeah.
Okay. And I mean, really old enough that they had spruce trees in there that were 15, 20 foot high,
Mm.
which is very old.
So some of the underbrush was gone.
So a lot of the underbrush was gone. You had these meadow-like areas.
Yeah.
They weren't swampy. It was all hard ground. But the moose and tons of beds and tracks and scat everywhere, right?
I'm just trying to figure out where you're at.
You know exactly where I was at. But, anyhow, so I was hunting. I was sitting in one little meadow area, and there was another one. I thought I could see it.
Yeah.
Right? I thought I could see if there was moose over there. It turned out the bushes and the underbrush was just high enough in between me and that spot.
Yeah.
And guess where all the moose were that night?
Over there.
Over there. So where did I hunt the next night?
Over there.
Over there. And guess how many moose showed up?
None.
Exactly.
They were back where you were the other night.
Right. No, they weren't over there either. But it was a really cold night, and I think that's why they came in. But we were talking about wheelers. We're going to talk about wheeler stories with moose. I will say, wheeler can get you a lot of places.
Yeah.
But like I've solo hunted a lot for moose with a wheeler. I've never tried to take one out by myself with a wheeler.
Mm.
One particular, and talking about stuff that maybe you shouldn't try to do, go that direction.
Yeah.
I went in this particular spot this past weekend, very steep trail. Very steep trail and somewhat swampy in the bottom. And I purposely brought a meat wagon this time because I knew I wasn't going to be able to bring my moose camp in on my wheeler on that steep trail.
Right.
There's other ways I could have gone, but it would have been a lot swampier. And I just didn't want to spend the hours to get back there.
Mhm.
So I decided to take the steep trail down. So I brought a meat wagon, put all the weight in the meat wagon, going down, going in, had zero issues. On the way out, there's this one kind of tundra sticky hill that I had to climb and go over that I've never had an issue with before.
Mhm.
But I was on my way up it. And I don't know how many, actually, a couple 100 pounds maybe in the
Yeah.
maybe
They can handle quite a bit.
in the
Yeah.
meat wagon, right? And it's an old beat up meat wagon. But I'm trying to climb that thing and I could not climb it. I'd get near the top and I would just burn out and my wheeler would seek into the tundra.
Really?
And I'd back up and try another spot. And I did that 3 or 4 times. And I finally just kind of, because it's hard to back a meat wagon, especially in the tundra.
Oh, yeah.
Finally got worked down to where I could kind of side hill, drop down, drive over to a spot that was a little better and was able to drive up and over.
Yep.
In which case I was finally not mad. 'Cause it's dark. I'm running by headlight.
Yeah.
My wheeler lights aren't very bright, so I'm running by headlight.
Mm.
And then I get to the steep trail later, which is hard and rooted.
Mm-hmm.
And I climbing that with the meat wagon was just like, I had to keep that thing moving. Tires were scratching and it kept moving, but it was a little puckery.
Yeah.
So that was my moose camp. That wasn't a moose.
Right.
If I had a front and a rear quarter in that meat wagon,
come out a different way.
I probably would have come out the same way, but I would have had minimum of 3 trips out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, easy.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, going up that hill easy.
Going up that hill.
Yeah.
And, my wheeler's I need to put a lot of money into it. It was functional. Part of the reason I went where I went is because I know I didn't have to go very far. I knew the trails, right? I knew my wheeler, it's got some issues, but I know what they are and I know how to remedy them.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to go out somewhere where I was going to do a ton of riding in the hills,
Right.
solo hunting, where I might be 15 miles from the truck when I break down. I didn't want to be in that situation.
Yeah.
I've been there before.
Yeah.
We talked about it on the podcast. But anyhow, that's another thought. If you're going to go in wheeler hunting,
Mhm.
if you're going to go somewhere steep, typically a moose camp, in my estimation, is going to be the heaviest camp you're ever going to take.
Oh yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
you're solo, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you're on a wheeler, you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring the cot, I'm going to bring the nicer tent, and I'm going to bring the nicer sleeping bag, and I'm going to
Moose
bring the
and
action
brown bear.
packer of food,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And
Even caribou a lot of times, depending on where you're at.
yeah, well, I just know for me, like, I tend to go set up a camp for
Mhm.
moose, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so you can bring all that stuff, and I was very consolidated. I felt like in what I brought, I knew exactly what I had. I used almost everything I brought,
Mhm.
right? To some extent, I had one small action packer that had like 3 thermocells and 2 jet boils and a bunch of extra cans of fuel, and I just grabbed it like, that's the jet boil,
Yep.
right?
Mm.
Didn't need 1 thermocell,
Yeah.
which was great.
Yeah.
But all I would have needed
That's
was
not
one.
the case every moose.
Right. But all I would have needed was one. Do I need 2 jet boil cans? No, I'm hunting by myself. I only needed one of those, right? Like, I could have cut some more stuff and some more weight.
Yeah. You didn't
and
bring your whole set of cast irons, though.
No. I typically don't hunt with cast iron.
Yeah.
Dutch oven.
Dutch oven, yeah.
Anyhow, just the whole weight thing is a big deal. Moose love swampy areas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And don't load your wheeler down. If you don't have a meat wagon, that's not necessarily an issue. But if you're in a real swampy area, I would run 1 quarter, at least out of the swamp, quarter at a time.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you turn that thing over, or you get stuck in some bad ruts and you don't have anywhere to throw that quarter, or you do turn over and next thing you know, your quarters are in the mud,
Right.
you just don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
that's my biggest takeaway on hunting wheeler with a moose. Like,
Wheeler with the
can ride-
moose.
Is that what I said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hunting moose with the wheeler. Sorry, I'm tired. Okay. You can probably tell. I don't even know what to do now. I've talked so
No.
much. Like, what do I do now?
Well, so that's a good point. Watch your weight, watch your wheeler balance. Make sure you're not overburdening yourself trying to get through swampy
Right.
moose country.
Yeah.
So what about you, Dalton? What are some early moose hunting tales, lessons learned?
Early on, it was the classic mistake of cover country.
Mm.
Everybody that I talked to in the circle I ran with at the time just wanted to go out and cover country. And that's a mistake,
Mhm.
right? You talked about just riding.
Right.
And I found myself going on a lot of great trail rides and seeing a lot of moose sign. But
Sometimes very fresh, huh?
yeah, like running down the trail.
Yeah.
Sometimes, exactly. The butt of the moose going away from you. Yeah, been there.
And that was probably the first year or so that I was moose hunting. And then I started getting advice from people like, no, go out, find a spot and just sit there
Yeah.
and call and hang out and just watch, just wait.
Mm.
Moose are habitual, right? They are not necessarily predictable in where they're going to go all the time. Sometimes, yes. And if you
Right.
learn one particular area, you can figure out where they're going to come out in the evening to come out and start feeding and travel out into the open a little
Right.
bit. They'll usually bed for most of the day when it's hot.
Yeah.
Later in the season, the activity range of time will be a lot greater because it's cooler most of the day, like we're starting to see right now.
Right.
Thank goodness the last couple of days we've gotten down to the high 30-degree mark. This weekend, knock on wood, should be better than last weekend where it was just nothing but 55 degrees to 60 degrees and pouring rain most of the
rain.
time.
Right.
Yeah.
We had one clear, cold night last weekend of opening season,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, probably the most moose activity that we saw all weekend.
Yeah.
And my wife and I were hunting the same general area a few miles away from where Mo was camped. We gave him a wide swath of quiet area because you went into your spot and you weren't riding after that.
No, that
You
was-
went in there, parked the machine, and
was the
just
plan.
stayed there. And that was something that we knew. I knew where he was, and I would ride in other areas. Midday. My wife and I were camped up with our friends up at the main camp. Had the teepee set up there. And nice, comfortable camp with cots and all the amenities and things like that up at the trailhead.
Yeah.
And we went in, during the for the mornings when it was half decent weather. Sometimes it was a couple of mornings it was just blowing wind and pouring down rain. And I looked outside the tent at about 5 or 5:30 at first light when you could first start to see.
Mm-hmm.
The whole valley was covered in fog, and it was just pouring rain, and it was blowing about 20 miles an hour. And I said, no, you know what?
Yeah.
I'll hunt this evening when the fog is gone. And that worked out just fine.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Sitting still. And
early on,
yeah.
it was just moving too much.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what I would say. And the second or third year that I started moose hunting, I started getting to higher areas and glassing a lot more, just kind of looking for a big bluff to get on and overlook, honestly, way too much country,
Yeah.
but just trying to find moose, like where are the moose at?
Right.
And in that time, I would overlook a valley that had a bunch of trails cutting through it. And I consistently saw several times over other wheeler riders that were moose hunting ripping through a valley, and I would see moose on the trails.
Mm-hmm.
And as the wheelers approached, once they got under a mile or so and they really got to start to be loud, the moose would just step back off the trails, and they wouldn't even step back more than like 20 yards.
But that's the thing, in that kind of terrain.
They would step back
That's all
into
they
the black
need.
spruce,
Yeah.
stand still.
Yeah.
The wheeler guys would ride by, turning their heads, looking each way, if even that, and keep on riding.
Yep.
And the moose would come right back out and start feeding again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really my confirmation as to how I wanted to moose hunt.
Yeah.
At that point, I realized, okay, number one, I've got to get better at calling. And number two, I've got to find a spot where I know moose want to be and
Yes.
then hope that they show up,
Yeah.
and then I can try to call out a bull. And then I would say that the biggest progression for me moose hunting was learning how to call.
Yeah.
That is by far and away my favorite way to moose hunt.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of great moose hunting out here in Alaska where it's just glass, glass, glass. And that's great. And I love glassing for moose. They're, relatively speaking, pretty easy to spot most of the time.
Pretty big.
If they have a big rack,
Yeah.
especially if they have a big rack,
Yeah.
those big white satellite dishes off their head make them kind of a dead giveaway, right?
Mhm.
If you can find those white paddles, then you're looking at a moose. But learning to call, because a lot of the interior where I've moose hunted predominantly in that heavily brushy, wooded type country,
Mm-hmm.
especially in that like black spruce, tundra, hummock, swamp country where they love to live
Yeah.
around the ponds and the rivers and the lakes and the sloughs and things like that. It's probably the most important thing that a moose hunter can learn to do is properly call.
Well, and during that time of year, if you learn to properly do it, you can manipulate the moose to go
Yes.
places maybe they wouldn't otherwise. If you
Yes.
if that bull thinks you're a
Yeah.
bull in his territory, he might
Yeah.
deviate off the plan
Yeah.
he was going to take that
Yeah.
evening and come check you out.
Right. Now, knowing when to call,
Mhm.
time of day is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've mentioned this before, but when I'm out on a camp and I'm hunting in the morning, obviously if the weather is half decent to good,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to be out hunting.
Yeah.
If it's blowing wind and pouring rain,
Fog.
then,
Yeah.
and if bottom line is if you can't see or it's super windy, then it's not worth going out because number one, you can't shoot what you can't see and you don't want to call on a bull that you could potentially shoot and then not be able to see him and then him bust you and make a circle around your camp and wind you and then leave and then you lose that chance, right?
Yeah.
So if it's too foggy to see wait. Just be patient. Moose hunting is a lot of patience. And there are years that it won't even happen, right?
Yeah.
Because of that. And specifically talking about hunting in thick country. But getting up and calling in the morning at first light, just before first light, maybe 20 minutes to a half hour before first light, just some light calling, right?
Yeah.
And then progress into 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. Usually I'll stop by, usually 8:30 or 9 o'clock, right? At that point, it's been light for a couple of hours. And then you give it a rest. You go back to camp, whatever.
Yeah.
Do a little bit of calling midday if you can. A lot of times moose will get up periodically throughout the day to get up and stretch and maybe feed a little bit and then go back to bed. And then in the evening, by about 5 or 6, I'll resume calling.
Right.
And by 5 or 6, they're starting to get up. The sun is not as intense. And especially as the season progresses, it gets a lot colder by 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening.
Yep.
Now they're moving. And like you said, you're not just trying to call a moose in directly from his bed. A lot of times they'll be up and moving already towards an area that hopefully you're positioned in already. But then you're trying to divert a moving moose to come check you out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Calling doesn't just have to be a challenge to a fight.
Right.
And that's something that I didn't realize until a few years into moose hunting. And I'll back this up by saying the way that I've always been told to call by several other people was cow calls, because you want to attract a bull, right? Now, for us as residents, it's any bull in 20B, right? So if we're hunting in an any bull area, we don't care how big it is. It's a meat hunt. Obviously, if I can kill a bigger bull, that's great. But I'm not one to pass up a bull moose in an any bull area.
Yeah.
I
shoot the one God put in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's not about the antlers for me.
Yeah.
I love big moose antlers, but that's not what I'm moose hunting for, at least in an any bull area. So, but early on, the idea that just cow calling was going to only bring in the bulls that were interested in a cow, right?
Yeah.
So you could call in a spike, or you could call in a 50-inch, or you could call in whatever, right? Any bull is going to be interested in a cow. Well, that's true if the cows are in heat.
Right.
And the bulls know when it's fake and when it's real, because their girlfriends all around them, the real deal, are telling them when it's time.
Yeah.
And so if you cow call too early in the season, you're not going to do yourself any favors. And if anything, you might push them away because they know that's not legit. Bull calling. I bull call the first day I'm hunting in September, whether it's September 1st or 2nd or 3rd, whatever. I think the first day I hunted this year was the 2nd. I was at work on the 1st, regrettably, but job has to go on.
Oh, that's right. You were.
But going out there on the 2nd this year, I was calling right away. And on the 3rd, I was calling again, and the weather had actually let up. And we had some luck with getting the bull to come in. And it ended up not panning out to get that bull, but he did come in, and he was curious. He just didn't, present with a good enough opportunity. Bottom line, it sometimes just doesn't work out like that. It just didn't happen. But I've called in multiple moose over the years now that I've learned more about calling. I've called in more than a handful of moose before the rut is even going on. They'll come out in velvet and grunt, and they're not coming out to fight. You're just lightly grunting and lightly raking the brush, not aggressive. You're not breaking a bunch of stuff. You're not grunting every 10 to 15 minutes. You're not cow calling. You're just trying to simulate a bull that's starting to get interested, a bull that's in his area, right?
Yeah.
Jeff Day in that episode a couple of weeks ago talked about you're in his area, right? And in a densely populated moose area, you're not always just trying to get him into a fight. They know how many bulls are around them. They're familiar with their own area. And if you're intruding on that, they're just going to come out and check out and see what's going on.
Yeah. Are you a threat? Are you not?
And just lightly, not aggressively, just light bull calling for the first half of the season, really.
Yeah.
And then once you get into that colder weather, like this weekend, I'll
Mhm.
start with a few cow calls.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily start with, but I'll add some cow calls. I'll start cow calling by this time of year.
Yeah.
So for me, the best thing that I've learned and the thing that's helped me the most through moose hunting is learning to call better.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm still learning more and more about, and I love learning about it. I love calling animals. It's a huge part of moose hunting for me.
That's a very good point. And something a lot of new guys I don't think learn right off the bat. And
Yeah.
if they do learn it, maybe they don't have the right sequence. You're trying to set
Right.
up a scenario
Right.
for these moose that
Mhm.
they're familiar with and they're going to come into. So,
Yeah.
you actually reminded me of a story that touches 2 points that I want to get into kind of related to that. But let's take a quick break real quick, and then we'll get into that.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
All right. So I like what you had to say about not covering too much ground or not focusing too much on covering ground only and calling.
Yeah.
A part of that combination is not being too ADHD about your spots.
Yeah.
So part of calling is a process.
Yes.
Moose can pick up on your calls much farther than you think they might, especially if you're using one of those bull collars,
Yeah.
the big horns.
The little fiberglass bullhorn.
And I mean, that sound can travel a long ways. They've got big satellite dishes on the side of their face.
Yeah.
Big ears. They can hear for a long ways, and they can pinpoint you very, very easily.
Yeah.
But they might be a ways away. One mistake I've seen a lot of people do is they'll go to a spot, sit for an hour or two, call, and then get up and move to a different spot. I'm not seeing any bulls. All right, well, maybe I'll try this next clearing,
That's
a
a good
mile
point.
down the trail.
Yeah, good point.
I'm going to go down there, and then I'm going to call for an hour or two there.
Right.
And then, no bulls. All right. Give them time. You had mentioned it very nicely. Be patient.
Yeah.
Calling for moose and moose hunting in general is a game of patience.
Yes.
Mhm.
So dedicate yourself. Don't just dedicate yourself to not covering too much ground, and having that be your main focus. But if you're going to pick a spot to hunt, pick a spot to hunt.
Right.
Stay there and give the bulls time to come into you, to find you, to come check you out, to expose themselves.
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't happen before, last light. And that is
Yeah.
unfortunate, but I can tell you from personal experience, there was a hunt I did. This was several years ago where me and our mutual friend Jay, we were out moose hunting and we went to this big lake.
Mhm.
And this is also part of the next point. But we went to this big lake and we're sitting on the side of this lake and calling a little bit, checking it out, glassing. And we see there was a cow on the other side with the older calf, bigger calf. So we were watching them. They're there. We're still doing a little bit of calling here and there.
Mhm.
And we could hear a bull, but we couldn't see him. So what we decided is, well, since we've already put some effort into this particular spot, we're going to come back here in the dark in the morning and be sitting here at first light to see if we called something in and he's still hanging around. So that's exactly what we do. We sat there till dark, couldn't see anything. All right, let's pull out. Go back the next morning, and as soon as the sun came up, there's this bull.
Hmm.
And he had wandered into the lake, and he had the time to get there and get comfortable and get into a position where he was exposing himself. So even if you dedicate yourself to an area for a couple of days, sometime. You know, it can take time for these moose to come in.
That's preferable.
Right, exactly. You know, you don't want to be covering so much ground that you're missing half or 80% of the moose in the woods.
Yeah.
Like you had pointed out, they could be 20 yards inside the brush and you can't see them in some cases. In most cases, I would say.
Yep.
So play the scenarios, be patient, give them time to react to the scenarios that you're playing, and it will pay out. That will be a much better option than waking up every morning and going and just running your wheeler or jumping in the truck even and just running around and trying to cover as much ground.
Yeah.
You have a much lower chance of running into a moose on the trail if you're in a machine that's run by dead dinosaurs and you're making noise going down the trail.
So you mean fossil fuels?
Yes.
Remaking that dinosaur noise.
Exactly.
Is that how they sounded, Mariah?
Some of them had to.
According to the Jurassic Parks.
Really?
Which is the most accurate means we have to judge that, obviously.
Never seen it.
But anyways, so be patient and dedicate yourself to an area. Do not just call for 2 hours and move on and call for 2 hours and move on. Again, you're going to hear stories from people who say they've done it that way and it worked. None of this is a 0% chance of success.
Right.
It's just a lower chance than the next way.
Mm-hmm.
Moose don't do hardly anything in a hurry.
Right.
Just keep that in mind.
Exactly. Now, the other part for this story, so we were, on the edge of a lake. It was a fairly substantial lake. Not anything like Chilkoot, but, pretty good for the interior. So we end up spotting this bull, and it was about 500 yards away, a little over. We do all of our verifications. We make sure it's legal. Make sure it's a good bull. Work on our, the scopes and our ballistics, and we're verifying everything. We're making sure we're good to go. Doing all the checklists like you're supposed to before taking a shot, right? You don't want to just get too excited and pop a shot off the first chance you get.
Yeah.
Here's a point for anybody that's hunting over water. If you can only see a moose from the knees up, it ain't shallow water.
No.
Moose knees are fairly high off the ground. And if they're standing in water where you can only see them to their knees, chances are it's at least a couple feet deep where they're standing. And there's an even better chance that they're just walking out on the shallow part that might have some grasses they want to eat. And there might be deeper water next to it, which is exactly what happened to me.
Yeah.
So we, took our time, made a good shot. Thing was down in one hit. Watched the hooves fly up in the air as I came off the recoil. High-fiving, bro hugging. I hop in the little canoe and go to get across this lake. And Jay stayed back, and he stayed on the other side of the lake so that he could kind of guide me in if I needed it, right? It's really easy to get disoriented when you go across water like that. So pretty sure I knew where it was. I had a pin on my Onyx. I head across this lake, and I cannot see this moose. I don't know where it is. I'm paddle up that bank, down that bank. I'm like, where is this moose? I know I dropped it. I saw it go down. And we've been watching it ever since. It didn't stand back up and run away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we did our due diligence, making sure, post-shot verification of death.
Yeah.
And so I get out of the boat on that bank, and I'm walking up and down the bank. I'm like, I know this moose is here. It has to be. And I look over in this, I don't even know what you'd call it, but like a lagoon style kind of cut of the lake. And all I see is a floating shoulder and a little bit of the antler sticking out of the water. That thing tipped over into about 10 feet of water.
Oh.
It was just a deep pit of this lake, and it had been standing on a little peninsula style shallow part that just came out and let it get access to those good grasses. And man, when I tell you, it was rough getting that thing out of there.
Wow.
We ended up using, I had to lasso it around its antlers, get it come along, get to shore. The shoreline was brushy, super brushy all the way to it.
Yeah.
So we had to cut alders and just make a path to even land this thing on.
Yeah.
And then pull it to shore as close as we could. We thought about trying to float it back across to where the trail we walked in on was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it was about 500 yards, and dead moose do float for a little bit.
Yeah.
Until that bullet hole pops and, starts letting air in, or water in and air out. Usually the gases will keep them afloat for a time.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to risk getting halfway across this lake and all of a sudden now we've got a 1,000-pound anchor
starts to
on
sink.
the canoe.
Right.
So we decided to pull it up on the shore, and it took some time. There's a video of me trying to pull this thing out of the water. It took a while. So with come-alongs and ropes, and we tied off to a tree, and we're just yanking this thing. And the thing about pulling an animal with headgear on out of water is it likes to dig into the dirt and everything.
Did you pull out head first or butt
head
end
first? Head first.
Really? Okay.
It may have been easier if I'd gone hind legs first.
Yeah.
But they were underneath the water and I couldn't get the rope around them. So I just wrapped the rope around what I could find and pulled it out.
How long did it take with the rope along to winch it up, and how far was it to get it up out of that water?
So it wasn't far from the bank, which is the thing. Not like some of these lakes in the interior, they get very deep very fast.
Yes.
And so, and that's what was the case in this one. I would say it probably took, the full process was, probably 30 to 45 minutes of just trying to manipulate this moose out of the water, which getting it to the bank wasn't hard.
That bad. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't horrible, but it's heavy.
Oh yeah.
It's 45 minutes of intense work.
Yeah.
And so because getting it to shore, it's easy. It was floating. You just wrap a lasso around it and yank it to shore. But trying to get it to where it's not digging itself in and it's not going a direction you don't want it to go, and then you pull it a little bit farther, and then a hoof gets stuck underneath a root or something like that. Now you got to dig that out. It wasn't that bad, but if you're talking, and that was a morning hunt. We had gone out there before,
so at least
before
you had
first
light.
light.
Yeah.
We had gotten that thing. I mean, literally 30 to 45 minutes after the sun came up.
Nice.
So we had all day to work on it. The difference is if you shoot that thing at 7 or 8 p.m. And it falls into water that deep, now that 45 minutes is precious time you have to gut that thing out if you're going to leave it sit overnight.
Right.
Or now it's dark, pitch black before you even get that thing onto shore.
Yeah.
So something to be aware of. It's going to add, 45 minutes ish. In some cases, it might be an hour depending on the situation you're in. Luckily, that area wasn't too swampy once you got on the water, at least not directly next to the lake. So we weren't battling a whole lot of that stuff.
So once you got it hooked up to the rope along, how long did that process take, and how far did you have to rope along?
That was the 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay, that was. Okay.
That was. Yeah.
So it was ratchet a little bit and then go get it unstuck of where a hoof would dig in, and then go back up, keep on working the rope along, and then back and forth, and forth.
The roping it and getting it to shore was 5 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, you just, I had a canoe. Yeah. So I just canoed right up to it, wrapped the rope around its head, and, it's floating. So you just pull it right to shore. It doesn't take any time at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it getting stuck in the mud, and then you having to and it's not gutted at this point.
Right.
So it's, full body weight.
All the weight.
So it does add time. And depending on the situation, like I said, I was lucky to have a nice solid bit of dry ground.
Yeah.
To pull that thing up on. It was well rooted ground. It had a lot of little trees and stuff that had, kind of firmed the ground up. So, but if you're in a real swampy area, that could be a whole nother story. Now you're fighting that on top of the moose being in deep water. And so it's just something to keep aware of. I've seen multiple moose be shot in water that people didn't think was as deep as it is. And especially if you're a first timer and you've maybe never seen a moose that up close. I mean, they are tall animals.
Yes.
Very tall animals.
Yes.
So just be aware of that when you're trying to gauge what they're in, the conditions they're in. If they're, if you can only see part of the legs, or you maybe can't see the bottom side of their belly, it's deep.
Yeah. Don't shoot one if he's,
try to manipulate that moose out of that, maybe that particular spot through calling or whatever means,
or just wait.
They will wander up. And they're going to move on. He's just there feeding.
Yeah.
And especially if you're not fighting sunset.
Yeah.
Just give it time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you watch a moose for 2 hours and then they turn broadside for you and give you a perfect shot. Again, patience.
Yeah.
Patience. So
yeah, I agree.
All right, Mo, back to you.
All righty. Well, I haven't been in any situation with a moose in water, thankfully. Hopefully I never will. But So I had a story from this past weekend again. where, and this isn't the only time this kind of thing's ever happened to me, but it didn't actually happen to me. But, Dalton mentioned how my goal was to ride in there, park the wheeler, and not start it up again, right? Just stay there quiet. I ended up camping like 100, 150 yards from where I was hunting. It wasn't my original plan, but it was only good, flat ground I could find where I didn't have to do a ton of work. Because I went in there when I got to campsite, it was dark. Anyhow, so the second day, there was something I needed to do, and I needed an internet connection. I had my inReach, so I was texting. I was talking to somebody. I needed to do something, so I had to run back out to where I had service. So I was just going to drive till I knew there was a spot I knew I had service enough to use the internet on my phone, but I was going to see if I could stop before then, and I just could not find a spot. I'd get a bar, and as soon as I try to connect, it'd disappear, and I'd say no service. You know how that goes. So I ride up to this spot, and it's in the bottom of a meadow. And so I get to the spot, and I get there, and I pull my phone out, and I look up, and I see sitting further up the trail, about 200 yards, and so I pull out my binos, and it's a hunter in Sitka gear camo, and I'm like, great, I just messed up. I think it's his friend that we've referenced. I think it's him, because I'm thinking, man, I think he hunts down here, and I'm like, man, I messed up his hunt, and I'm like feeling really bad about it, but I'm like, well, I'm here now, right? And I gotta get this done, so I'm gonna stay here for 15 minutes and take care of this. So it was still slow internet, but I got what I needed to taken care of. Then while I was waiting for some of the stuff to work through so I could do the second part of what I needed to do, I call you and I call my wife. And I call you and I say, hey, can you tell our friend that I'm really sorry when you get down here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I did not want to do that. Anyhow, so I get back, and I don't think anything else really about it, except that I do think about it later and think, man, I feel terrible about that, right?
Yeah.
So I get back, 3 days later, something like that.
Yeah.
I get back up to the main base camp because I'm headed out, and I waited on purpose that time to ride out until after dark.
Yeah.
That way I wasn't messing anybody's hunt up.
Yeah.
And so I ride out, and the whole after dark thing always causes more issues than you wish it did when you're trying to ride. But it wasn't too bad. But I get up to the main. I get up there and meet you, and I say, hey, so did I mess up so-and-so's hunt? And you said, no, you messed up a guy that messed up his hunt.
Yeah.
Oh.
And what had happened, you said, was that our friend had walked down, sat down, was sitting in his spot, and he had a guy ride a wheeler right past him, park his wheeler, and then walk down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not paying any attention to the fact that there was a guy sitting there hunting.
Yeah.
And he was, just hunting further down, and a terrible spot to sit, right in the fire zone. And he wasn't hidden. I can tell you that right now.
Standing out in the open.
He was sitting out in the open, but of course I was a wheeler, so he obviously knew what I was. He could hear me coming, but I come up over the ridge and I see something moving, a lot. It's far enough away. I'm not sure if it's a moose or if it's a machine.
Right.
That's the first thing that crossed my mind, because I just saw it kind of out of the trees for a minute. So I think it's riding the edge of the tree line.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I got my binos out when I realized what it was. Anyhow, so I was very happy at that point that I messed up that guy's hunt.
Yeah. Yeah. Got a taste of his own medicine there.
Yep.
Unintentionally.
And that is a good point to make. Yeah. Be aware of people around you.
Anyhow, I wanted to bring that up.
Awareness, especially if you're hunting near, let's say, a town area or something like that. Awareness not only for animals, but for other people, for their experiences. It's all good stuff.
Something to assume is that if you're going to be on a four-wheeler accessible trail, you're probably going to deal with competition at some point.
Yeah.
That's just the name of the game.
Yeah.
Right.
The farther away you get from good access, the fewer folks there are going to be. Is there good moose hunting in some of those areas? Absolutely there is.
Right.
Is it going to be the best overall experience with other outdoorsmen? Well, it's kind of a roll of the dice. You never know.
On the same thing, I want to bring this up. James, I'm sorry, I keep referencing this last weekend to talk about things that were just talking about stories, the things that I've learned. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's something recent, but a lot of it is stuff that, yes, I've learned it, or it's something I'm thinking about and use an example from last weekend, but it was, a lot of times, it's a lesson I learned years ago, right?
Yeah.
And one in particular, in this very thing, the night we met that friend, which was while out moose hunting,
Yes.
we messed up his hunt. Do you remember that? We were
Yeah.
hiking through a field,
Yeah.
and we all of a sudden see a guy standing, wearing Sitka gear, waving like, "Hey, I'm hunting over here."
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so we left that
Yeah.
area
Mhm.
and ended up meeting up with him later, and that was a long time ago. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
He's been a longtime friend of ours. But yeah, Mo and I were still teenagers, and we were walking into an old logging cut, and walked into this old road, looked around. We were kind of looking around with our binos, and Mo goes, "There's a guy over there waving at us." He was probably a couple 100 yards away anyway,
Mhm.
something like that. And we said, "Oh, somebody else in here." Turn around and walked right back out.
Yeah.
Didn't walk past him to go hunt because there was a lot more area past him that we could have walked
yeah.
into and hunted.
that's where we were
Right.
headed.
that he couldn't even see from his vantage point. But we didn't want to walk through his direct hunting zone.
Right.
We walked out, and then later on that night, he killed a moose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
Right.
we ended up helping him retrieve it with our 4-wheeler. We
Yeah.
ended up connecting, and now I've been friends with him and his family for 8 or 9 years now.
At least,
Mhm.
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So being respectful and giving someone their space
Yeah.
goes a long ways.
Which is not a unique problem to Alaska, even. I mean, when I was deer hunting in Ohio, it was kind
right.
of the same thing. You'd be going into a certain area, walking up a power line or getting into a spot you want to sit, and you just walk in there, you see somebody's already there.
Yeah.
It happens. If you're on public land, is public.
The
It
difference-
doesn't mean it's,
Yeah.
you're not going to be all alone out there.
The difference with deer hunting is if you're sitting on a power line,
Mhm.
say with your bow for deer archery. I'm thinking archery season, Ohio. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting on a power line, or I've got a spot. I may even have a stand set up. I may walk in opening day and find that there's a guy sitting that same power line,
Mhm.
but I'm 200 yards down the power line from him. That, while it's unfortunate, it's still the way it is. And we're both going to hunt. And neither one of us is going to be that mad at the other. Oh, he found my spot. Well, yeah, just because you had a stand set up here doesn't mean it's your spot. And it's 200 yards away. You're bow hunting. Nobody
Yeah.
really likes it, but it is what it is. That's deer hunting. A lot of guys come
I know some
to
people that would get annoyed with
Alaska-
that, but yeah.
Sure, there's a lot of people that would get annoyed at it. But
Yeah.
to some extent,
I
deer
certainly would.
hunting,
Yeah.
that's deer hunting, right?
Yeah.
Even shotgun season, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But this is Alaska.
This is Alaska.
Mhm.
There
Yeah.
is
There's plenty of
A
elbow
lot.
room for everybody.
We don't hunt like
Get
that
out of
up
my
here.
spot. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
just going to throw that right out there.
Yeah.
If you come into a spot, and you know what? Let's just segue right into this.
Mhm.
This is the 200-pound gorilla sitting in the room. But be respectful.
Yeah.
Right? Just be respectful. Anyway.
But yeah, that's what I was going to say. We don't hunt up here like you hunt deer.
Yeah.
It's not. This isn't public land where there's a deer hunter every 100 yards or every 200 or maybe even 500 yards. Depending on the area, 500 yards might be plenty for moose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're in a different area than somebody else is. But if you have to walk past them and through their hunting spot, especially,
Right.
Mhm.
then you should, if you know they're there and
Yeah.
you get an inclination, you should be turning around and heading out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That same night, we were going to head a different way.
Yeah. Yep.
And we heard, actually, I think we heard a gunshot, which was,
Couple of them. Yeah.
and we're like, somebody else is hunting over that way. Okay, let's go this way.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not because we heard a gunshot and thought, oh, they ruined the hunting spot. You don't ruin a hunting spot with a gunshot, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
But our goal was to avoid
Right. Just
Mhm.
leave them alone.
leaving them.
Yeah,
I don't want
right.
to accidentally walk up on somebody hunting or into
Right.
somebody's hunting spot. I've had people while I'm hunting ride their wheeler right up to me. Oh, how's it going? What you seeing?
Mhm.
And it's like,
Talking in normal tone, I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a great transition into what I was just going to say next.
What's that?
Yeah.
Another big thing that I learned early on with moose hunting that I didn't do, but everybody that I went moose hunting with did that really annoyed me was talking.
Mm.
Everybody?
Like at a normal volume.
Pretty much everybody I hunted with early on except you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I was like,
There were several other people that I went moose hunting with early on that, that not not close family that I hunted with, or Mariah, who is now, whatever. He is family now. But early on, some of these folks that I would go out with, a very common thing that I would get on them about, and that I even had to remember myself, but I would always try to make an effort at it, was to be quiet, because moose can hear really, really well.
Right.
And that was just always a big pet peeve of mine, was just be quiet. You don't have to be the most still that you're ever going to be while hunting. It's not whitetail hunting.
Right.
You have the ability to move around within reason. You don't want to be up and walking around.
Steady movements. No quick. Yeah.
Right. But, even if you're overlooking a huge area, sure, you might be able to move around pretty freely. But noise is the bigger problem in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. Because
absolutely.
You can always see a moose step out and just stop moving. Right. But if you're making a bunch of noise, that moose might never even step out of the trees.
Yeah.
Because he hears you right there. If it doesn't matter how well you play the wind and how still you're going to sit, if you're making noise, crunching, candy wrappers around and eating and munching away and chit-chatting with your buddies in a normal tone of voice, or my favorite one is the loud whisper, I call it. When somebody is trying to be quiet, and their version of being quiet, it sounds like this.
Right.
I always get on them and say, hey, be quiet. A whisper is no vocal tone.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You don't use your vocal cords.
Right.
You just use the air coming out of your mouth to form the words. And
like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now don't creep anybody out, Mariah.
ASMR. Like that.
What? What is that?
Don't. It's
asymmetrical something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sensory resonance. Is that it?
Don't look at me. I don't know.
I have no idea. I'm not sure what you're into. I don't really care. Anyway, but talking is a big pet peeve of mine. I was watching a moose hunting video that came up on YouTube. I think it was just last night. Really, my wife and I were sitting on the couch and just watching a couple of hunting videos because it's better than Netflix, right? And the thumbnail for this video was like this monster bull moose. And I thought, man, this looks like a neat moose video. It was like, it was 15, 20 minutes long. So I thought, wow, it's decently well done. They must have got some good footage. I clicked on it and watched it. And it was great. The hunting was pretty decent. They killed 2 great bulls. But my goodness, those guys talked and talked and talked. And it was ironic because they didn't see any moose for about 8 days in between their moose kills.
Oh, really?
And the other thing that I found very interesting was that the first moose that they shot, the previous night had been blowing about 50-mile-an-hour winds. They were stuck in their tent the previous evening. They got up the next morning, didn't even make a noise, got up out of the tent, and there was a moose out on the riverbank. They shot it. They hadn't been making any noise yet.
Yeah.
A week went by of them talking out loud to the camera. All right, well, we're out here. It's been 7 days since we killed our first bull, and we're just waiting for another one to come out. Just in those tones.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I was actually yelling at the TV. Well, if you would shut up, maybe one would come within a mile of you. And what was funny was the next moose that came out 8 days after the first one did was first thing in the morning after they'd been asleep all night. They got up out of the tent, boom, there's a moose out in the gravel bar because you'd been sawing logs all night being quiet, right?
Right.
The point is, be quiet.
Yeah.
Just moose camp is run silent, run deep. Just be quiet. Just whisper. It's okay to whisper, but whisper in soft whisper tones. Don't whisper like this because that's not really whispering.
Yeah.
You're still using your vocal cords.
Laughing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laugh
giggling loud.
silently.
Yeah.
Just,
even if you got to put your face in your shirt.
Yeah. Just be quiet.
But
I used to
just
hunt
be
with a
quiet.
guy whose quiet laugh was, his loud laugh was similar, but his quiet laugh, he could not remove this really high pitch, and I don't think I can even repeat it, but it was like, it was something like that.
That was really good. That was really
was it
good.
good?
Yeah.
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 He would laugh, like he'd whisper, and he wasn't bad at being quiet.
Yep.
But
But once you got to telling jokes and goofing
Yeah.
off, and hey, I get it. Camaraderie is a fantastic part of being out in the woods with a close friend or with a family member.
Right.
That's great, and I enjoy a good hunting partner as much as the next guy does.
Mhm.
But just keep your sound in mind.
Yeah.
You've got to be conscious of that. Moose are so sharp when it comes to their hearing. You just have to be careful about that.
It's one thing, and we all love having a good time when we're in the woods.
Oh yeah,
It's our favorite place to be.
Yeah.
We feel at home.
Heaven
we wanna
forbid
be
all
having
three
fun.
of us end up moose hunting together.
Right. But you don't want having a good time to
Right.
then ruin your
Right.
hunt.
Your
Right.
potentially better time.
Yeah. Would you rather be giggling or shooting moose?
Yeah.
You know, like that's kind of how you have to think about it. Not to say you can't crack jokes and whisper back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
all of us do that. You can even do that at a bear bait if you're confident and
I would
you-
argue you can make more noise in a bear bait than you can moose hunting
yeah.
by far because I do it.
Yeah, because they don't have as big of ears.
Well, and
But-
they don't seem to care as much.
Yeah.
Black bears, not
Right,
grizzly bears,
right.
but black bears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black
Anyway.
bears.
I because it's quiet, to bring a book.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times on my phone, because
Yeah.
even then, if I'm with somebody, I can focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
Not because you can get in a conversation, you can get into jokes, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes when you start laughing about stuff and making jokes,
You just
The
get
harder-
distracted.
the harder you try to laugh silently
Mhm.
or not laugh, the harder it is to keep it quiet.
You end up with a
Once in a while, you might hear that in this podcast.
That was good. That
Yeah.
was good. Yeah.
Because one of us has done something stupid while the other person is talking serious,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
and then the other one is trying not to laugh at the stupid thing the guy
Yeah.
did. Right?
throws your train of thought off.
We
It's-
never do that.
Never.
Never,
Never.
ever.
I usually edit it out. That's
Yeah. Now, just one more thing I wanted to tag off of
Yes.
just what Mariah just said. He mentioned a book. Now, a lot of guys, I've been seeing an increasing number of this, and I've still never done it while
Mhm.
hunting. I usually bring earbuds while I'm hunting because when I get into my tent at night, especially guiding,
Mhm.
because for me, I'm away from home for an extended period of time. Usually at least a couple weeks at a time.
Right.
In spring bear, it can be up to 6 weeks. Last fall, it was even longer than that. But while I'm guiding, it's a constant job from before light to after light,
Mhm.
right? I'm busy with a client. I'm making sure everything's going okay. I'm busy looking for animals. I'm probably making him some meals and making sure he's dry, making sure his gear is working right. Does he need something else? It's a constant process all day long, and it does get exhausting.
Yeah.
And when I get into my tent at night, I enjoy putting in my earbuds,
Mm-hmm.
putting on some music or a podcast or an audiobook.
Yeah.
And I'll just lay there for I don't know, it depends on how tired I am, but usually for about 10 to 15 minutes per evening. I'll lay there until my eyes just get so heavy that I'm falling asleep,
Mm-hmm.
take out the earbuds, and then I go to sleep, right? One point I'll make is don't ever have your noise canceling on. If you have wireless earbuds and you have noise canceling versus transparent audio ability,
Yeah.
don't ever have noise canceling enabled while you're in your tent at night.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or anywhere else for that matter.
That's a good point. I never thought about that.
Yeah, don't have noise canceling on because if you have something to walk through camp, you need to be able to hear that.
Yeah.
The second thing is, and this is the part that I haven't done personally, but I see a lot of guys doing it, and I've hunted with guys that have done it, is they'll put in earbuds while they're glassing,
Okay.
and they'll listen to an audiobook or a podcast or some music on low volume
Really?
in their earbuds just to pass the time of day, right? Because they're just glassing over miles and miles of country. They get bored. They just want something playing in the background just for entertainment, right? Something besides the wind in your ears.
Right.
And especially if you're trying to be real quiet. Do I understand it? Absolutely. Do I get bored glassing? 100% I do.
Yeah, of course.
The only advice I would have is if you're going to do that, don't do it while you're moose hunting.
Yeah.
Noise is so important when you're moose hunting. It plays a part in how the moose find you or don't find you.
Right.
And it plays a part on your ability to perceive what's going on around you with the moose activity.
Correct. Yeah.
Because all you need to be able to hear is a faint,
Yep.
Right.
a half mile away,
Yeah.
possibly. If it's a still morning and you're out glassing and you don't hear that quick grunt, you miss it.
Yep.
And you don't know that he's interested.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the only time he grunts.
Yeah.
Or if you hear a faint raking a quarter mile or more away and you've got earbuds in, even with the transparent audio setting on, or even if you only have one earbud in, you don't have 100% hearing ability with earbuds in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how low the volume is or if you don't have noise canceling on, you're still going to miss some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the other problem is you lose your sense of direction of your hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important to key in on as well.
Right.
And again, this is especially pertinent for moose hunting. You've got to be able to hear if a bull is interested or starting to respond. Don't have earbuds in while you're moose
Yeah.
hunting.
Well, and there's an interesting point to make to that as well, because there's a lot of companies right now that are putting out earbuds that are for hearing protection.
For shooting.
They give you,
Mhm.
in some cases, amplified hearing while you have them in, and then they read the decibels, and when they detect like a gunshot go off, they'll actually cancel out any sound that comes through your ears, create
Right.
noise canceling, and
Right.
that way your ears aren't getting blown out if you
Right.
have like a muzzle brake on your gun or
Which,
something like that.
That's a great idea.
But
But
it and it can work very well,
Mhm.
and especially if you're in an area where you might not need to know the exact direction because you're just you have this one shooting lane,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
you're going after a targeted animal that you can only hit in this one shooting lane maybe. But when it's creating that artificial sound that's then traveling through those headphones into your ears, like you said, you lose direction.
Mhm.
It's now artificial sound that
Yeah.
you're hearing. And so a lot of that left, right, forward, back ability to detect
Yeah.
where's this moose coming in from
Yep.
is out the window. Now, it will protect your hearing in the event of a shot. And I know people that will keep them out and then put them in once they've
Mhm.
located
Right.
the moose. Once
Right.
it exposes itself, you can see it.
Right.
Now, you're probably going to shoot it at some point if it presents a shot. Put your earbuds in. That way you're protected. Hearing protection is a big deal.
Right.
But I would advise against wearing them the entire time you're in the woods.
Mhm.
There's events with snap shooting and things like that where you might not have the ability to put them on ahead of
Mhm.
time. But
So,
Yeah.
That's just part
I will
of it.
say and I've not used any of these game hunting specific, the Walker, what's it called? The Walker in-ear
Yeah, the Walker
the-
ones.
yeah,
Whisper Light, whatever.
there's
it
a
is.
bunch of
Well,
different
the
brands.
Walker has
yeah.
been around for a long, long
The
time.
Walker is not the top of the line anymore.
No, it's
No.
not. But I haven't used any of those specifically. But I know with a lot of earbuds, there's a lot of technology now that is directional.
It tries to be.
And
It's not very
Nothing's
successful.
gonna
necessarily
be
gonna
the real
It's not going to
thing.
be
Yeah.
the real thing. If you have impaired hearing or something like that. I just wanted to bring that up because so somebody doesn't write in and say, oh, they have directional earbuds, right?
Yes.
They have ones that advertise,
Now,
but
I
it's going
am-
to be less
From the
accurate
tech
than
guy
natural sound.
Side of this.
I am aware of the companies that have directional earbud ability. And
Yeah.
I know of people that have used them and they still say that it's not the same.
Right. And that's what I'm getting.
It's
It-
better
they-
to be safe
they
than,
can replicate
than
it,
sorry.
I still
but-
haven't said what I wanted to say about it though, and that is this. Earbuds themselves are harder to replicate directional sound. What's not hard to replicate directional sound with is a headset. And a very good directional sound headset, and I don't know if it exists in the hunting industry,
Mhm.
but if it does, because it's a bigger around your ear, they can put microphones that throw.
And they do it for video games
They
and
do it
stuff
for
like
video
that.
games,
Yeah.
and I have a headset at my house that cost me like $150.
Yeah.
And
But taking sound from a video game that's designed to be behind you, in front of you, to the side, versus
Mhm.
translating real noise
Yeah.
into that it works, but it's
There's
less accurate.
so much other noise
Yeah.
out there
Right.
between the rustling of the leaves and the wind and the water and everything
Mhm.
else. And then, like I said, you get a faint grunt.
Mhm.
Where in the world was that?
Right.
Well, I
Right.
personally do not hunt with earbuds in.
Right.
Mhm.
They're there depending on what I'm doing. If I am glassing from an area where I know there's not going to be a grunt within a half mile because I'd see it before it grunted, Right.
Right.
Yeah.
then I
wide
might
open
throw-
country.
But then I'm
yeah.
probably going to have one in, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to be in a tight situation, but it's middle of the day and I'm sitting because it's better than being in the tent.
Yeah.
I might have one in. Typically, though, I'm going
Right.
to have a book in my hands
Right.
because I don't need to listen to an audiobook.
Mm.
I can read. Right?
Yeah.
I listen to audiobooks all the time, far more than I actually read,
Yeah.
because I can get so much more in. Right. But
Right.
anyhow,
Yeah. Exactly. It's important to protect your hearing, but just make sure you're not impairing your hunting ability.
yeah.
Mhm.
I just wanted to bring that up so somebody
Yeah.
doesn't write in and say,
Right. One thing with sitting, you were mentioning,
Yeah.
sitting there,
Yep.
being aware of your hearing. Another thing to be aware of, and we've talked a little bit about a moose's sense of smell.
Mhm.
It's not their primary sense, but they do have it.
Yeah.
Obviously, all animals do. Be aware of the wind when you're choosing a place to sit.
Right.
If you're gonna, not travel the distances, cover as much ground as you can, you're gonna select one place to sit, maybe even come back there the next day. There are some really simple and easy devices you can bring with you to gauge the wind, which direction it's going. Because the other thing too is you can think the wind is still, but it is slightly moving in one direction. It's just maybe not
Yes.
enough to make you feel it on the back of your neck or to move the tree branches, but it is still flowing a certain direction, especially if you're on a hillside. Now you get those thermals moving up and down the hill depending on the time of day. The easiest and lightest way I found to do that, they sell them at pretty much every outdoor store, is it's a little bottle powder. And
Yeah.
there's so many different brands that make it. It's hard to name them, but
Yeah.
Windicator's
Yeah,
one.
Windicator, yeah.
That's I think the one that they sell here.
Yeah.
Wind powder.
That's
things
pretty
like
much
that.
what I call all
But
of them.
yeah,
it's just
all
a
a
windicator.
windicator. Yeah, exactly.
You can put Johnson & Johnson baby powder in there and it
You
works
can.
just fine.
You can.
That's
you can
usually
refill it
what
with
I've
that.
done.
But you take that. I keep it right in the side of my bino harness
Powdered
at all
sugar
times.
still tastes good.
But you give it a quick little shake, and then with the cap open, you just give it a squeeze, and it'll just
Yep.
puff some powder up into the sky.
Yep.
mhm.
Even if that wind is moving extremely slow, you're going to see which direction that powder moves.
It just floats off in a
And if you're sitting in a tree line, on the edge of a tree line, and you puff that powder into the air and it moves into the clearing you're glassing, you got problems. You might want to reevaluate where you're sitting in there.
Go to the other end.
Right. Go to the other end, go to the side, go somewhere else than
Yeah.
right in the path of the wind as it's flowing down there.
Right.
Do moose always care about smell? No.
Yeah.
Sometimes they
Yep.
just go where they're going to go regardless of
Right.
what they smell.
Yep.
But in the spirit of being as careful as possible to give yourself the highest chance of success, knowing the wind and understanding the wind while you're hunting is something I feel like maybe not every new hunter knows,
Yeah.
and it is very important.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
That's a good one.
and the last point I'll say before we move on is after a successful kill, during the breakdown process, the field dressing process, be alert, be aware, keep your eyes and ears open. Don't lose sight of the fact that you're out in the middle of nowhere, mixed in with other animals other than moose. I was in a situation a couple years back out on a moose hunt with one of my buddies, and we were fortunate enough to find a moose. He was perched up on a lookout point. I was hunting us very close to him off the side, and we managed to figure out where this bull was, both be in vantage points, and the moose presented him a shot. He took it, dumped the moose. Great. We link up afterwards, high five, bro hug. About 5 minutes later, we're giving it some time to expire before we go investigate. It fell behind a bush. We couldn't actually see it, but he knew it was down. He had put 2 rounds in it.
Okay.
It hadn't gotten up from the other side of the bush, so he knows it fell back there. It's still back there. 5 minutes later, on the other side of a small pond, 2 bears walk out.
Mm.
Now they're black bears. They're still bears.
Yeah.
And in certain parts of Alaska, bears see gunshots basically like dinner bells. And so that's kind of what I imagine happened in this situation is they heard something. They came to investigate it.
Just curious. Yeah.
We only saw one at first, and I was about to pull the trigger on that one. And then the second one stood up. It was a older cub, but hadn't separated yet.
Yeah.
So illegal to shoot.
Right.
And so we gave the moose some time. We watched those bears. They kind of wandered off into the brush, and we approached the moose.
Mm-hmm.
So we get up to it. We're, taking pictures, and we start the process of breaking this thing down. This was an evening hunt.
Right.
So he dropped this thing late. It's getting dark. Let's get this thing torn apart. We get most of the way of getting the guts out. And I turn around, and both of those bears are probably 40, 50 yards from us.
Oh, really?
And so we stand up, rifles in hand, and start basically pushing them back away.
Mm-hmm.
Just show aggression, show size. And we were able to push them back into the brush.
Yeah.
They didn't want anything to do with us.
Yep.
So then we go back to taking care of this moose. And as we're taking it apart, it's getting darker and darker. There was a little bit of cloud cover, no stars, no moon, no nothing. It was dark. We were able to get a good amount of light. We came prepared. So we had light. We're just breaking this moose apart and getting it out to our machines. And about every 30 minutes or so, we would, look around. I mean, we were looking around more often than 30 minutes, but about every 30 minutes, we would see eye shine coming from the brush.
Mm.
And we just stand up, start, doing like a deep yell and just kind of walking towards the eye shine.
Define eye shine
So
for folks.
with animals, when you shine a flashlight into a dark area,
Mhm.
they have reflectors in their eyes that will then kind of beam that light back to you. And
Yeah.
so you'll, like, if you take a flashlight out in your backyard and you're shining it around. And not every animal has this, but you can look around and basically see, animals as they're looking at you.
Mhm.
Cats are a really good example. I think foxes and things like that all have eye shine. And
Ermine do.
Huh?
Ermine do. I had one
Ermine?
across the trail in front of me riding back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's basically just the reflection from their eyes back to you from your light source.
Yeah.
Now, depending on the angles and everything like that, you don't always see it. But, we basically had those bears watching us the whole time. Now, they never created a problem for us. We didn't have to take any action or anything like that. And, with black bears, that's kind of, to be expected. They're not, they can be very aggressive. They can be dangerous, but they're typically, you're bigger to them than
Right.
you would be to
Right.
other bears. And so
Yeah.
we never ended up having like a negative encounter, but we did constantly have to make noise, shout a word here and there, just make sure our presence was known. And that's something important to keep in mind when you're taking an animal apart in the woods. You're not alone out there, and you are taking something apart that is food for other animals out there.
Yep.
So be aware there's a ton of stories of, grizzlies especially coming in on people as they're taking moose apart and stuff like that. So just be aware, be alert, don't let your guard down, don't forget where you are and what you're doing. That can get you in a really dangerous situation, and just keep that in mind while you're out there. All right, folks. Well, we promised you a little bit of a surprise at the beginning of this one. So we are trying a new format for our show. So we're going to start breaking down our longer episodes into shorter, easier to digest portions that we're going to release on Monday as normal. So that's not going to change, but we're going to release another episode on Thursdays. Sometimes it'll be a continuation of the episode from Monday. Sometimes it'll be a whole other topic if we have something shorter that we want to tackle. But so if you are one of the people that like the longer format and you want to listen to the full 3-hour episodes, the only difference is now it'll be more of a Thursday thing. You can listen to both of them back to back and get the full blown experience with a little blip in the middle. But we have had a lot of people that say they just don't have time to listen to a 3-hour episode, and in an attempt to help you guys as best as we can and make it easier for you guys to digest, we're going to try this out. Let us know how you think about or what you think about it. So we're going to wrap this one up today, but we'll be back on Thursday to talk to you guys some more. Make sure that if you have any questions about what we talked about today or anything you'd like us to talk about in the future, hit us up on our socials at The Northern Hunter. If you search that on either Facebook or Instagram, you'll find us. Our email, info@thenorthernhunter, or the contact button on our website. If you'd like to support us in what we're doing, definitely head over to the shop and the partners page. We have a lot of great options there. Mo and myself are both wearing very sharp Northern Hunter hats. They look really good. So grab up one of those. Really helps out the show, helps us grow. And the other thing that really helps us is reviews, leaving us a rating on whatever platform you're listening on. It takes 2 seconds, doesn't cost anything. It really helps the algorithms of the show and getting everything out there to new people that might need the information, as well as sharing it with your friends. That's a big thing. If you know somebody that is trying to get into moose hunting, some buddies that might benefit from listening to anything that we put out, sharing it with them really helps us out as well. So we're going to sign off for today, but till Thursday, get out there, get after it, and good luck. We'll see you there.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.